Ladies and gentlemen, then without further ado, we will now begin the KIPF-KAA-KAI Joint Seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Chae Soo-jun and I'm a professor at Kangwon University. It's very nice to meet you. I would first like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here today at this very special occasion. Today's seminar will feature a presentation by Professor Jacob Saul, focusing on his most recent publication, Public Net Worth. The book deals with the role and function of accounting in a democratic state, discussing its impact on the efficiency, sustainability, and transparency of public finance. In particular, it compares and analyzes the historical evolution and current situation of public accounting. We hope that this seminar provides you with public finance and accounting insights and opportunities for new discussions. Due to the restraints of the space that we have limited the number of participants. Therefore, today's seminar will be recorded and uploaded on the KAI website and YouTube channel. Throughout the duration of this seminar, you will find the question and answer sheets laid out in front of you. So if you write down your questions and comments, we will deal with them during the Q&A session. Please write down to whom you are addressing the question to, and we ask for your active participation in these discussions. Before we dive into the lecture and the panel discussion, we will first welcome President Han Jong-soo of the Korea Accounting Association for the opening remarks.
Please. Good morning, everyone. I am KAA President Jong Soo-han. Welcome to KIPF and KAI and KAA joint seminar under the title of the Public Net Worth. I'm so honored to invite you all here. First of all, let me thank Professor Jacob Saul, who will deliver the wonderful presentation today. Professor Saul recently published the Public Net Worth. So we can see that the accounting decide the fail and success of the democratic country. In other words, so accounting defines a democracy and supports and sustain the democracy, because accounting takes a huge role in the societal and the economic growth. So efficient accounting can grow the country and provide the efficient decision making. So the accounting provides the information for that. If accounting can provide efficient and transparent information, that society can grow further. But in the opposite way, if the accounting cannot reflect the reality and if it's not transparent, the government cannot sustain. Despite so, if we don't see the result of the accounting, and accounting is very difficult to check closely, so there are many difficulties and the challenges. And sometimes the accounting can be something uncomfortable. So in that aspect, Korea is not the exception, I believe. We invested a lot of the net worth into the country and to make the accrual, the balance sheet and the accounting, but we still have many challenges and problems. So in order to make have a national balance sheet and the national accounting, efficient national accounting, we have to see whether we have sufficient resources and the tools for that. So in that aspect, today's seminar is very important. Through the Jacob Saul's presentation under the title of the Public Net Worth, it could become the state's net worth. So let's learn and understand about the concept of the public net worth, so that the value of the accounting and the meaning of accounting can be understood through the national finance and the national accounting. And we have to also see the impact of the accounting to support the efficient democracy. I will hope that we can have a discussion about that. So this discussion will be chaired by the Professor Bokang Kim, and also we have by the prestigious other panelists like economist Oh Seok-tae and Professor Jung Do-jin and Professor Hong Sun-man and Director Jang Woo-hyun. And also I'd like to thank you all participants offline and online for joining this seminar today. Concluding my remarks, I hope that this prestigious event can become the solid foundation to go further closer to the democracy. I hope that today's event can be fruitful and meaningful to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remarks. Next up, please join me in welcoming Director Park Sung-jin from the Korea Institute of Public Finance for his remarks. Please give a big hand. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today's remarks were supposed to be delivered by the president of our organization, President Kim Jae-jin, but because of his other schedules, he wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, so I will be reading in his stead. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kim Jae-jin. I'm the president of the Korea Institute of Public Finance. At the outset, I'd like to congratulate you on the successful opening of the joint seminar hosted by KIPF-KAA and KAI. We are gathered here today to think about the future of public finance and to put our heads together about the future direction accounting standards in public finance should take. A democratic state is faced with climate change, demographic changes, and other societal and economic changes. These rapid changes have incurred rapid increases in government expenditure and poses challenges and risks to public finance. A democracy is faced with numerous challenges, and national accounting is at the center of the solutions to address these challenges in order to create more public finance efficiencies and create a foundation for a stronger democratic foundation based on accounting. We are here taking that first step with Professor Jacob Saul, who has joined us all the way from the US, to look at the history of accounting and to look at the ties between democracy and public finance and the types of impacts accounting information has had throughout the years. In the panel discussion, we will be looking at accrual basis and how it has enhanced transparency, efficiency, and sustainability of public finance, and we will take a deep dive into these topics. We have invited people who can provide us with administrative, finance, and national accounting perspectives from the panel to look at how accrual basis can guarantee strong democracies and accountability. We will be looking once again at the usefulness of accrual basis in increasing accountability, transparency, efficiency, and sustainability, and will open up new horizons in public finance. Transparent and sustainable accounting standards and policies are led by the KAI and based on our efforts in the past 50 years, especially at KAA, looking at the next 100 years of what we can do. And also KIPF, the Korea Institute of Public Finance, will lead a more brighter and sustainable future in the accounting arena of Korea. So starting with today's seminar, KIPF, KAA, and KAI will continue to engage in constructive cooperative partnerships and discussions to share each other's expertise and professional data and information. We will continue to put our heads together to do our best as a value-based partnership in creating a brighter future in Korea based on accounting and strengthening accountability. We thank everyone for your time and interest. Thank you very much.
감사합니다. 마지막으로
Thank you. Let me invite President Choi Hyun-duk from the KARI for his congratulatory remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Good morning, everyone.
연구원 최현덕입니다.
I am Choi Hyun-duk
한국회계연구원은
from the
한국회계기준위원
KARI.
산하로서
KARI
지난
is
3월
under
8일에
the
설립되었습니다.
KAI, which was established
존경하는
last
여러분,
August.
오늘 제이콥 설 교수님의
Respectful
Public
participants,
Networks, 회계는 어떻게
I'm very
민주주의를 구할 수
happy to
있는가에
hold a
대한
seminar
주제로
on the
세미나를
topic
개최하기
today,
위해서
Professor Jacob
모임을
Saul's
주셨습니다.
Public Networks, How
이번
Can
세미나에서는
Accounting Save the
정보
Democracy?
제도의
In this
복잡성과
seminar, we
재정
will
확장
listen
후
to
직면한
Professor
문제,
Saul's
그리고
lectures
이에 대한
and
해결책에
discuss the
대해
complexity
제이콥
of the
교수님의
government
강의로
finance and the
토론하기로
problems
했습니다.
faced by the
오늘
financial
강의를
expansion
해주신
and
제이콥
solutions to
교수님께
them.
감사드리고
I'd like to thank
토론해 주시는
Professor
김봉환
Jacob
교수님,
Saul and
박혜진
also
아나운서님,
the older
교수님,
panelists,
홍순만
Wo Seok-tae,
교수님,
economist, and
장우현
Professor
실장님께
Chung
먼저
Do-shin and
감사의
Professor
말씀을
Hong Sun-man and
드립니다.
Director Chang Woo-yeon
현재의 재정적
for your
어려움은
discussion.
여러분들께서도
Current
이미
financial
아시다시피
difficulties are
의료,
caused by the
연금,
expansion
노동
of
등
government
정부의
benefits
혜택과
and scope,
범위가
the
확대되면서
healthcare, pensions, and
발생했습니다.
education.
이에 더해
In
인구
addition to
통계학적
this,
변화로 인해
demographic
노인
changes
비율이
have led to
증가함으로써
an
정부
increased
재정에
number of
큰
the elderly
압박이
citizens, putting
가하고
significant pressure
있습니다.
on government
우리나라는
finance. Korean financial deficit
60조의
continuously
재정
grew from
적자에서
60 trillion in 1997 to 111 trillion in 2000, 392 trillion in 2010, 846 trillion in 2020, and 1,067 trillion in 2022. This was resulted from the government choosing to issue additional debt instead of finding a fundamental solution to financial difficulties. Professor Saul has recommended to establish an accounting system centered on net worth and demanded government to make appropriate financial decisions by considering both liabilities and assets. I totally agree to him 100%. Though difficult, debt must be recognized and measured on accrual basis. Assets must be also recognized and measured on the accrual basis. However, in the case of the national assets, considering its diversity and scalability, and also considering the use of the various purpose at different times over a very long period of time, our accountants are faced with the challenges of establishing recognition standards and measurement standards for government assets, which is quite different from the corporate asset recognition and measurement. So I'm convinced that this will not only improve the fairness of the financial policies, but also be a way to treat future generations more fairly. And I also look forward to discussing these issues and seeking solutions together through today's seminar. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you for your remarks. Now we will dive into today's lecture,
회계는 어떻게 민주주의를 구할 수 있는가의 저자인 제이콥 솔 교수님께서
to be delivered by
진행해
Professor
주십니다.
Jacob Saul,
강연은
centering
영어로
on
진행되며
his book
정치
Public
통역이
Net
제공됩니다.
Worth. We will be providing simultaneous interpretation into Korean. Please go ahead.
미국 먼 길에서 오신 만큼 큰 박수
He's
부탁드리겠습니다.
traveled a long way from the US, so let's give our Professor Jacob Saul a big hand.
Does this work? Thank you so much. That was great, by the way. What a great introduction. So once again, thank you to the Korean Accounting Association. Thank you also to Mr. Hani, who is not here, who organized all this so generously and with such vision and such force. I've been so impressed by Korean accounting culture since I've got here. I have never anywhere in the world had discussions of this level or heard the things that we've just said, which you say as if it's normal to say that, but you can't really come and say that in the United States. People would be shocked within the accounting profession to hear you say it with such ease and confidence. So this discussion, while many would like to see an accrual balance sheet, the idea that we would put intangibles and things like ESG questions on there, and we discussed this yesterday, it seems obvious to me, and we discussed all the different ways we could possibly do this, but there's a lot of resistance to this. And here I find a more open mind and a lot more creativity within the industry, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. I was actually told that this was the case in Korea. I just couldn't imagine it. So this has really been a kind of inspiring visit so far. And I'm I mean, not only is South Korea really impressive, I say this as someone who travels the world and someone who knows East Asia well, I was not prepared for South Korea. I was not prepared for the wealth. I was just not prepared for any of it. And I wasn't prepared for this either. So it's quite a surprise. And I feel a little bit stupid that I haven't come here sooner, because Korea makes so many progresses in many things. Perhaps Korea will be the leader in this new way of dealing with assets and liabilities in the public and even in the private sphere, right? Along with some very, very prestigious co-authors, we just finished this book. And once again, showing Korean dynamism, the book took a long time to publish in England, but only took a week to do here. I like that a lot. That was also extremely impressive, okay? I mean, this is really important. But this comes from this, we're living now in an age of both plenty and scarcity at the same time, right? We've got all this stuff, but we know it's limited, okay? We also know the planet is stretched now to its limit, perhaps past its limit. So we're in a very dire situation. We're also in a situation, as you've mentioned, that governments are also stretched. We just took this habit. There was that theory. Does anyone remember this theory in the 80s and 90s that we would just grow our way out of debt? Sorry, it's just like, no, that's not exactly how it works. We have lots of debt. We have lots of liabilities. States also have assets, but we are reaching a crisis point with demography, with growth issues, and just the demands that come on states. Think about all the bailouts that states have had to do. Markets keep crashing, and states keep having to come back in. And as we've talked the last couple days, there needs to be these partnerships. This book, interestingly enough, was written with this general idea that we really needed to create public balance sheets for countries. I was asked to come in. Everyone who wrote this book is a professional in finance or accounting. I'm a historian, and this was sort of my first book on accounting, and I met everyone, the other authors, during the Greek debt crisis when we were working on Greek debt. I'm going to talk about that today. We had real success there. We stayed in touch, we've worked together, and we came up with the idea of doing this book on public net worth. I've also written this book recently as well, which was translated into Korean, which addresses many of the same issues of the need for good government within markets. And we had several interesting discussions about that, where Koreans are also much more open-minded and pragmatic economically than I find many in the West are. I believe that economic ideology is often a stumbling block to pragmatism. It does not seem the case in this country from the discussions I had. I literally couldn't believe the open-mindedness, or let's just say pragmatism. But perhaps that is one of the reasons Korea has gone so far in such a short time. You have to see it to actually understand where Korea stands in the world. I mean, it's really amazing. So I go back to yesterday. These are these same questions. What makes states succeed or fail? Are there elemental ingredients? And my research has shown again and again, at least in Europe, governing via a public balance sheet is one of the most important tools that you can have. And it's a tool we do not use. And that seems incredible. This is a tool, the first time I've seen something resembling a almost comprehensive state balance sheet is in 1345 in Genoa, where the state was actually keeping balance sheets in one of the most advanced double entry ledgers I've ever seen. It was filled with strings and special pieces of paper so that there could be no fraud. It was quite remarkable, showing government assets in its investment in private companies from which the government was getting revenue. This is 1345. And one of the things I say over and over again is if we were doing this in 1385, why are we not using accrual now on a widespread basis in government? The word accountability in English comes from the French word accomptabilité, which just means accounting, but it has a sort of bigger meaning, accounting to make a rendering of sort of a public audit of the state, of the people who work for the state. And in The Reckoning, I explain this whole history, in particular in the French and American revolutions, how important this concept was and where this word came from. Now, I want to just sort of kick it right off with one of my co-authors, Ian Ball, who I think is known in Korea to many. He's worked here, he was just here. He's a historic figure. And it's an amazing story of how in New Zealand, he was able to create, almost by political accident, it's an amazing story, a national balance sheet in Korea. I mean, in New Zealand. What does that mean? It means that every time the government makes a decision, you have an accountant that accruals the decision outwards so that you understand all the ramifications of your decision. Now, once again, the accounting is quite limited, and Ian, being a really careful, super high power public accountant, doesn't like ESG being, any of those questions being on the balance sheet. And I agree with him initially. We're authors, we agree and disagree. This is what you get to do in a democracy, right? I like that. One of the things that Ian and I both agree with is that first we just need to get states to adopt good balance sheets. Then we can talk about ESG. However, yesterday, one of the things that's come up is that the public is really not interested in accounting or balance sheets, but they are interested in ESG, and ESG might be a way to open the door to getting better balance sheets. But Ian has explained all, I think in this room it's obvious, all the good things that can come when your government makes a policy and you have basically an accrual calculation going on right in real time to tell you what the costs will be. So you have your balance sheet, you can look at your assets, you can look at your liabilities, and of course, you can predict and manage so much better. And these are actually some of Ian's slides. Here's another slide that Ian, I think, presented in Korea a couple weeks ago. I just wanted to show them. This is what you can achieve with accrual accounting. And remember, obviously, Korea does a lot of accrual accounting in its government, but it is not at that point where when the executive or even the Congress literally makes a decision, you, along with your policy statement, you have a balance sheet statement as well. Remember how important that is for making long-term sustainable decisions, and it's also incredibly effective if done professionally to show to the public, to say, look, this is where we stand. And again, here are sort of Ian's, some more of Ian's slides. What is so important right now is that we really are in a position where many countries, even strong countries, can face financial crisis like we did in COVID or in an unexpected financial crash, which could happen at any day, right? We never know how many liabilities. Let's just say, I don't know, America has another banking crash. America's banks, as usual, are incredibly fragile. They always have too much debt. They don't have enough assets. The laws aren't great. They're a little better. It could happen with China's real estate market. It could happen with, like it did in England, with just mismanagement, as the English government is just completely incompetent and basically lost billions of dollars through, bad policy, essentially. That could have set off a chain reaction as well. So we don't know where these crises will come from. You need a government that is ready to invest lots of funds and to manage its assets and liabilities incredibly well. So these tools are the tools that you need in today's world, which is increasingly volatile, right? I mean, just think if you have a giant storm. Right now in California, we've had rains that have never happened before. It's incredibly costly, and the state has to step in. Private markets don't step in when there are these disasters. Only the state does that. The state has to be well managed to do these things. What does that mean? Well, that means not just being honest about all the liabilities that the state has, and that's something we've discussed. Is the state being completely frank about all of its liabilities? Does the public truly understand the nature of debts, the nature of future needs of the state, whether it be in education, whether it be in pensions, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be, I don't know, look at the roads in Korea. They're fantastic. By the way, you guys have great assets in all your new infrastructure, which I've just been looking at, right? So Korea, if you were to think about Korea in terms of public net worth, Korea looks really rich because it's done all this new building, right? So it's got all this incredible new infrastructure. It also has high-end, leading-edge industry. That industry, those are huge assets to the country. So you can put Korea next to a country like England or Britain, and frankly, Britain's still rich, but Korea's looking like it has a lot of assets that it can manage really easily now compared to Britain, which looks like it has a lot of liabilities as well. So it's very interesting. When you land here in many ways, and obviously this is Seoul, but from what I've also seen around the country, the parts of Korea look a lot richer than most of Britain. And Britain, if you leave London, is no longer a rich country. It's now at the level of Slovenia, seriously. And it absolutely is. We have to be honest about this. Outside of London, Britain is no longer a rich country. It doesn't have the assets and it doesn't have the possibilities. And frankly, it's not being managed well at all. Good government is another asset. That's an ESG question. So the question really stands here is, well, let's go on. How do you get good outcomes and how do you strategize as a country? And to be honest, it will take government initiatives along with public support. It takes democratic politics. I don't know why people find that such a terrible thing, at least in the United States. This idea that people come together, they democratically make a decision to make policies, for example, to create a national balance sheet, which is very hard to do, and I'm going to explain that to you, so that the country can actually have the tools to move forward in a sustainable way. By the way, Korea also has military issues as well. That takes incredibly good management. Korea is in a very tough neighborhood, as you know better than I do. And Korea, while it has remarkably good accounting, still has not pulled all of this accounting together. So Korea still faces challenges in spite of the fact that Korea has parts of the government which are well accounted for. It does not come together at various levels of government into a comprehensive balance sheet. And that is something that I believe Korea really could do. And if it did, it would give it remarkable powers, because New Zealand's a tiny little country with a tiny little economy, okay? Korea is now one of the top economies in the world. If Korea did this, and I believe looking at the level of accrual, the level of expertise, and the openness about this in Korea, Korea might be one of the countries that really could pull this off. There are places that are close. Canada's close. Great Britain has a comprehensive balance sheet. My friends built it. They don't use it. But I'm going to show you some history and explain the problems. It takes a culture, it takes willpower, and it does take strong and effective political voices to make that clear. So Korea still has these challenges in the realm of accounting. And one would hope, and I'm going to get to this at the end of my talk, one would hope that some Korean politicians would say, look, this could be an enormous advantage to me. Or let's say not even politicians, real leaders could say, look, Korea is so successful, but in such a delicate position in the world that this could be a way for us to have a huge advantage in facing the challenges that come. So this leads us back to some history, and I think that history, which is what I do, is extremely useful in understanding these challenges. And this old question that we've been discussing for the past day here is, why did England become so rich? And indeed, why did France become so rich in the 18th century, leading to their sort of colonial dominance, followed by Germany, followed by other European states, Japan, and the United States? They took over the world imperially, and we're still living with the fallout today. But they did become rich enough to do this. How did it happen? And there is one story that is quite remarkable to me. Now, it's a story which doesn't actually tell the whole story of actually how remarkable the Spanish and Portuguese empires were, but I'm going to go back to some slides that I showed yesterday, but I'm going to go in a different direction. And I want to show you the challenges of accrual, and I want to show you that the position we're in now is a position that Spain was in the 16th century. And I want to show you the challenges that lie ahead in trying to do accrual accounting. Philip II of Spain, by the time we get to the 1570s, is the most powerful monarch in the world. He has a world empire, a planet empire that spans all around the world. The Philippines are named after Philip II. He had Nueva España, which today is, which they named California after the heroine in a 16th century novel. Did you know that California is named after a fantasy novel from 16th century Spain? It's perfect, isn't it? It's always been a fantasy, California. But it was his fantasy. He had this. He had huge chunks of Europe. The Habsburg lands, everything in orange, was Spanish. This was enormous wealth. And if you look at the Netherlands, this was the richest place in the world. He owned that too, and he could draw on taxes from that. These were the areas that Spain controlled in the Americas. I want you to look at how much area this is. This was the great first world empire. It should have made Spain and Portugal the richest places in the world. It did not, okay? Although today, Spain is another asset-rich country. It's one of the most culturally influential countries. It's also up and coming. The Prime Minister of Spain is a good friend of mine, and he is doing a lot of work. Spain's numbers look really good. For his finance minister, she just went off to the European Investment Bank. She was not an economist. She was a budget expert, and that was so smart. Why put an economist? Put a budget manager in charge of your economy, and she worked wonders with him. But look at this empire. The problem with the empire was that empire is also very costly. You have to keep the empire up, and you have to be constantly militarized. And what this meant is that while Spain controlled the entire world, it was constantly in debt. It was building massive buildings, but it was also fighting religious wars and imperial wars. This is the Spanish Battle of Lepanto in the Eastern Mediterranean against the Turks, in which the Spanish drive the Turks back from control of the Mediterranean. This cost a fortune and made Spain basically bankrupt. It brought Spain religious glory and possibly real strategic advantages, but it cost a fortune. The real money was not being earned from all that gold that was coming on the galleons. As I explained the other day, it was actually being earned in a semi-modern economy in the Netherlands, which was a center of commerce, industry, and accounting and financial management. It was possibly per capita the richest city in the world, and it was also a city which was complaining to Philip about the taxes that it had to pay. Philip did not like these complaints, so he attacks the richest city in the world and sacks it. This is called bad government. He also doesn't like that there is religious tolerance there. So we get back to these old questions of can authoritarian or proto-authoritarian, in this case, governments, create long-term wealth? Sorry, I've been speaking too quickly. I forgot to speak slowly. Sorry about that. I apologize. But I want you to look at these images for a minute. Richest city in the world, and this is what the leader does to the richest city. Now, we've seen that this is possible, even in important countries today, that leaders will attack their own wealthiest parts of their country. Today, California is regularly attacked for political reasons. It seems quite insane because it is still the richest place in the United States. In fact, people are moving back from Texas because Texas does not have a big brain industry, and California, this is what we're good at. We're good at being smart. And that turns out to be a huge asset. In 1575, Spain is bankrupt. This is pretty early on. It has a massive debt ratio. And Philip II is stymied. He also has a value system As a nobleman, he believes that accounting is a merchant art and therefore lowly. It's actually a dirty thing to touch books because it's profit-oriented. And for an aristocrat, this is considered a bad thing to think about profits. So he has ignored accounting and he has racked up this huge debt. The problem is he really just can't manage it. People won't lend him any money. So finally, he gets this guy who's actually a member of the Spanish Inquisition, Juan de Ovando, to come in, and de Ovando understands accrual accounting. And he actually understands the importance of a balance sheet. And Philip II makes the most remarkable accounting legislation, and he asks Juan de Ovando to create a comprehensive balance sheet for government to manage the empire and its debt. It's completely unbelievable. And if you look at The Reckoning and you look at the new book that we've done on net worth, it will show a lot of these sources. This stuff's real. It's from the 16th century. This is legislation we'd be amazed to see today. Spain has a shortage of accountants. Its first double entry manual is from 1590. So the problem is finding accountants. We don't have that problem today, although we do have a shortage, at least in the United States. So it shows that this is always a threat, not just to industry, but to government, to have an accounting shortage. So Juan de Ovando was struggling to find people to make these books, and he helped sponsor this first manual of double entry bookkeeping. The problem is once again, Philip II is a religious fanatic. He believes that he should be the king of England. He also doesn't like that England has become Protestant, so he attacks it with the Spanish Armada, which is a disaster. So you take a bankrupt country, and then it takes all of its assets. Rather than dealing with its debt, rather than actually building more assets, it throws all of its assets away on war. You would think that a modern country wouldn't do that, but we're seeing it all around the world right now. War is coming up everywhere. No one profits. Well, some people profit from the war, but the public doesn't usually profit from it. The Spanish lose everything with this. I mean, it's a complete fiasco. Therefore, the need for this comprehensive balance sheet becomes even more pressing. And one of the things I found historically and personally is you get the comprehensive balance sheet when your back is against the wall and you have no other choices. When you're sitting in the office and you're running a government and you have no money, that's when you finally listen to your accountants, when no one will lend you a cent, right? It can even happen to you personally, right? When your accountant's like, look, you're gonna have to do something. No more buying vintage French wines. That's my problem. My wife tells me, you have to stop buying these wines. And I say, these don't go on the balance sheets. This is a religious necessity, this wine. But that's not how the world works, right? So I have a Philip II attitude towards collecting French wine, okay? This is true. So here, Philip's ministers actually do it. They create the first comprehensive balance sheet of the state. And what's really interesting is my co-authors were able to read these balance sheets and look at them to understand just how good they were. I am not a trained accountant. I couldn't do it. They verified that this was the first large-scale comprehensive balance sheet. So working together, and this was one of the first times that you've had a historian like me working with people who are active in finance today to try and do a book together and collaborate. It was quite extraordinary. We did not agree on everything. And so this is important. And we can talk about what there are parts of the book I don't completely agree with, but I generally agree with. But we were also able to figure this out as a literal milestone in the history of government and accounting. Now, one little note, do I even have this in here? No. They make the balance sheet, they never use it. They never use it. In fact, Philip II uses it to start auditing the elites, the grandees of Spain. He thinks they have too much money and he's paranoid. They don't use the balance sheet for management. They have it. They have it up until around 1640. They don't ever use it. They did it. This is it. You guys are accountants. This is like one of the greatest moments in accounting history, and you know just how typical this is. They do it, it is a miracle, and then they fail to use it. Okay, Spain does go into decline. For me, as a historian, I tend to see the use of accounting as a great measure of a country's decline or rise. I think it's a remarkable measure. We use many measures of understanding how countries are doing. The state of a country's books, I think, is a good measure of how the state of the country. We continue to have debt crises around Europe due to war, due to dynastic war, greed, ego, all the same things that play out often today, religious strife. All these things are bad for business, at least generally. Not for people in the arms business, not necessarily for people in certain businesses, but for the general economy, they're not so good. France and England start fighting these wars. They fight wars for about 120 years. Okay, this is a long time of fighting wars. They both end up with these massive debts. They both end up as the great imperial powers of the earth, more or less pushing Spain and Portugal out. What happens is they both end up with around, I would say, 40 million pounds of debt each. Now, how do you pay this off? Both countries come up with schemes to have private companies deal with the debt. And this is interesting, and I write about this in my book, Free Market, about why, again, it might not be a great idea to have a private company take on your public debt. Companies are profit-oriented, so they're not necessarily looking out. Sometimes it works to have private companies run things, or as I find in the United States, what's remarkable is to have competition between the public and the private, to have these partnerships. Seems to me, and this is what my book Free Market is about, rather than no government, smart partnering between government and private industry. That seems to be the way we've seen success over and over again. We've seen this in South Korea. This is also a way. You have entrepreneurs, you have private industry, but you really need good government and partnership to make this work. How do you handle debt? Well, it's passed off to these private companies which get monopolies in return. The problem is these private companies are Ponzi schemes. And both in France and England, this leads to the two first financial bubbles, the first real financial crashes. These companies are publicly traded stock companies, and both of them go bankrupt in 1720. Destabilizing the two great world powers. This is another remarkable moment in the history of accounting. France has a financier who has been much maligned in French history because, of course, he was a little bit dishonest and he was a bit of a pirate. But I found in the archives a 740-page book, manuscript written by him, which is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, and I've read it twice, and it's not easy reading, where he says the way to have a modern government that can handle crises is by using double entry accounting for state management, and he lays it out. It's a visionary work. It is handed to the king's minister, Fleury, and the king's brothers, and the king's brothers are both princes. They get a lot of money from the state, and they're completely corrupt. And what happens? They start the reforms, and the noblemen realize that if you actually have good accounting, the very rich people will have to pay taxes, and not only pay taxes, but get less subsidies from the government. Rich people, I have many friends who are extremely rich, they like government subsidies just like the next person, as long as they are benefiting from them. So what happens is that these very rich nobles undermine and destroy the accounting reforms in France, which leads to France being in a terrible position. It cannot deal with its financial crisis. This leads to a crisis in confidence. The French National Bank is undermined. The French idea of having possible currency is undermined. They have no national bank. They have no bailout. And one of the things we discovered, why do you think America is doing so well right now? In 2008, we have the biggest bailout. It's not just American industry. There's a lot of American policy going into American economic success. And as we know from Tesla, we know from Amazon, there's a huge amount of state subsidy going into these companies in one way or another. Elon Musk, as I've pointed out, is a product of state subsidies. He is an entrepreneur subsidized by the American government. He's a welfare entrepreneur, okay? I'm not a huge fan. I'm just not. No, because if he admitted that and said, actually, I've made all my profits from state rebates, I would say good for him. But he moves to Texas, says, I don't like the government, and it's just a lie. By the way, he's had to move some operations back to California. Again, our taxes in California are much too high. That's definitely true. Or maybe they wouldn't be too high if we used them to actually pay for some of our debts. So these are big questions. But France is left a country without the governmental financial tools, not only to manage the crisis, but then to become a stable financial entity for business and for stock trading. What do you need for stock trading? Trust and confidence. What do you need to manage your debt? You need trust and confidence, and you need low interest rates, right? And you need a plan to pay your debt off. So France fails to manage the crisis. I believe this is one of the reasons it lags behind Britain. It doesn't get beaten by Britain. My studies have shown that they actually develop together. So to see them as competing different countries is not exactly realistic. They're intertwined. But France gets a distinct disadvantage because its government goes bankrupt and has no way to deal with it, and it undermines not only banking, but stock investment. England is a different story. It is led by Prime Minister Robert Walpole, famous for being absolutely corrupt. However, one of the things I also found is he is from a family highly influenced by the scientific revolution, by Francis Bacon, and his father kept double-entry books, and he was taught bookkeeping at a young age. So when he enters into government, his first actions are complaints about state bookkeeping. This is unbelievable. You have the first Prime Minister of Britain who is an outspoken user of accounting. He uses it to govern well and to steal money for himself. It's actually quite a remarkable story, which has some lessons, actually. He also understands economics in a way that only a trained accountant would. He understands the necessity to bail the bank out, to pay investors 50% of each stock invested. He understands the importance of creating a sinking fund. He understands the importance of maintaining national banks and all these national institutions and making sure there is trust and confidence in the stock market. So he takes all this money from the government, he creates a sinking fund to lower the capital debt. He also steals some of the money for himself. He's an accountant. He knows how to move money around. But something else happens as well. There's an MP, a British member of parliament from Ireland, Archibald Hutchinson, who's also an accountant, and he starts writing public books that are presented in parliament, accounting out the state debt. And the financial press in the West is born from all these texts, these published, and I describe this in my other book, The Reckoning, how the financial press is born from the publication of balance sheets. The importance of balance sheets in modern economic history has been completely underestimated. England, therefore, at this point in the mid-18th century, has a government that knows how to do accounting, creates not yet a comprehensive balance sheet, but has literate people not only in the executive, but also in the opposition in parliament, and the public is reading balance sheets and arguing about balance sheets. We have a society that's literate in accounting. At this point, Britain is the most literate place in accounting, surpassing Holland. And it has a semi-open government where they can have a public debate about accounting and debt, and they can reform through public debate and elections. By the way, this shows these people who are doing this accounting, they're philosophers. They are people who are experts in ancient rhetoric, in literature, in philosophy, okay? Now, here we have a colonial image. Just like Holland, the British start showing accounting in their art. And here we have a picture of a colonial businessman who has made a fortune. He is so good at accounting that he is showing off that he can throw his books around. And he also is showing that he has not necessarily slaves, but colonial Asian underlings, which is something that's very important in the Western psyche. We also have warning warning paintings showing the dangers of a society that ignores accounting. Here are aristocrats who are drunk and partying while their accountant, you can't see it so well, walks away with a book saying these guys are hopeless. They don't know how to keep books. But what is most important here is that as Britain keeps staying at war with France, its debt goes to a remarkable 250 million pounds. That's a lot. And at that point, it is in a serious crisis of debt. It has fought the American War of Independence. There is another debate in Parliament, and this radical philosopher, Richard Price, I mean, he is a radical philosopher. He's radically religious. He's radical when it comes to democracy. He's considered too far, let's say, close to the revolutionaries in France, but he is called that most able calculator. And he writes a book about accounting and why the government must again take up accrual accounting to manage its debt. He is brought in by the government, by Pitt, to actually create a new sinking fund and attack the debt, and they do it. This is an incredible moment in history where they bring a radical accountant in who's also a philosopher and a religious reformer. I mean, accountants were different back then. He was in a lot of trouble, this guy. He was considered a kind of philosophical outlaw, but accounting was part of his philosophy, and I've written about why these radical low church Protestants believed so much in accounting and how important it was. But Britain has this possibility of open government. There's a political discourse that's possible about having open, successful, financially viable government, and they're able to do reforms, and they avoid having a revolution. You have to understand that I think it's in 1781, London has the Gordon riots. Half of London is burned down in riots that have to do with religious problems, but also in wealth inequality. The French, several years later, will have a full-fledged revolution. But the British come back, they reform their debt, they're able to do reforms, and they find the money for some social reforms from good financial management. This is something we've done before. They will go on later to found the profession of accounting, and this is really important. They also keep accounting at the forefront. Accounting had great prestige at this time in this building. Has anyone here been to this building, which is the founding building of the profession? It's an amazing building. It has Italian motifs because double entry comes from Italy, but it also has colonial images of how the British are using accounting to dominate the world, which is a sensitive topic in Asia because they're here stealing stuff in India and China and not far from here. And look how open they are about it. It's not a secret. And they show that accounting allows them to be the masters of the planet. I mean, can you imagine that today? Again, this is remarkable that the field is founded by an imperial power that is very clear that its empire has been made possible by good accounting. That could be seen as positive, but you also have to understand how remarkable that open vision is, that self-awareness. And by the way, they have one of the greatest libraries and collections of rare account books, which they took out and showed me when I visited, which was an amazing experience. This is how the accountant is shown today. And one of my feelings is that the field has to go back to the great ambitions that it had in the 16th and 17th centuries. I talk about this a lot, where it becomes part of religion, it becomes part of culture, it becomes part of great political discourse, and that the accountant goes from this back to this, to someone of great ambition, someone of great prestige, someone who has ambition for the society and can make that case. This is a Renaissance Dutch accountant, and this person looks like the kind of person who could lead your reforms. This guy could do your audits and get you a better rate on your car loan, okay? And I believe accountants, well, that's important. By the way, I have a great accountant, okay? I mean, it's one of my secret weapons. I'm startled once again looking at my colleagues that who are not accountants, they don't have great accountants. I'm just like, you understand what I get out of having a world-class accountant working for me? I mean, I'm a professor of accounting history, but I'm not an accountant. So this guy is important, but this guy is transformative. And this is the kind of person, woman and man, that we need to solve these problems, someone that can make these cases of this comprehensive balance sheet to the wider world. And that's why we're here today, because Korea is not a country that's waiting for the crisis to do this. Now, I want to just show you something very quickly, how important having good accounting is and having accountants who lead. When the Greek debt crisis happened, an investor in Greek bonds, I didn't know it was happening. He had so much money that he had the Greek government basically fly me into Greece as an accounting historian to try and make the case for accounting reforms, that if Greece, which was bankrupt, made small accounting reforms, that would lead to trust and confidence and a better deal in its loans. I started working with the European Commission on this. I started writing op-eds about this. I did not get paid for this. So the billionaire made billions of dollars. I made a few $1,000s. And he told me I got to make history, which is true. I would have liked a few $1 million, but I'll take history, okay? We were able, with the billionaire's help, to bring all the members of the Greek debt crisis to the University of Southern California in a secret meeting. It was open to the public, kind of, but where the communist government and the representative of the communist government is my good friend Fragiskos Koutentakis, and we like to drink together in Athens now when we go. And Koutentakis was an economist, and he sat in the front row, and we showed him how useful a balance sheet was and how useful good internal reporting was. And he was convinced, and he went back, and the Greek government did it. And there, we convinced the prime minister to do it, but even more than that, Greece, which can be a corrupt country, nonetheless has remarkable civil servants and a great respect for accounting, and the European Union and Commission helped, and we were able, this was me in Parliament, we were able to pass accounting reforms. Greece has some of the highest internal reporting quality in the world, and we were able, and there's Koutentakis chairing the session of Parliament, but we were able to convince the conservative government. Believe it or not, the communists accepted it. We had to convince the conservatives to accept the accounting reforms, because politics is always a backwards world, right? You have to understand that. And so Kyriakos Mitsotakis, the current prime minister, kept the good people in the office. And Greece is still doing the good accounting. Why? Because their backs were against the wall. They didn't have a choice. And the Greeks can be very pragmatic. And so they said, we have no choice. Okay, let's do it. Let's try this. And it worked for them. And as we know, Greece, which was considered out of the game, is back in the game. Investment is up in Greece, and Greece is making a comeback. It's still very fragile. And luckily, we were unable to get them to create a comprehensive balance sheet, but we got them remarkably close. And we got the executives of the state to protect the accounting office within the government in Greece. When I arrived in Greece at the Ministry of Finance, they were handing money out in plastic bags. By the time we left, they had the best internal reporting system, one of the best in Europe. So we were able to do this in a crisis. So my proposal is that Korea should not wait for the crisis. And that's the way the Koreans have been thinking. The Koreans should just get ahead like they are in so many things. This is an amazing opportunity for Korea to be prepared for crises so that when it happens, Korea can keep leading and be in a position of advantage, or, and I have to be completely honest, in a position of successful defense, because it's a dangerous world and you don't know what's coming out of Washington soon. And I will tell you, if things change, that person will sell you out for a gold pen. I don't care what your politics are. He happens to like some people north of here because he thinks they're tough. Okay, that's not a good thing. okay? I would like to see Korea together again, but that's complicated. In the meantime, Korea has to think about its security too. And to have good security, you need good accounting, because security is going to be based possibly on debt, all right? So how do we get to all these things? A rich country that is able to manage ESG questions, climate change, financial crisis, military crisis. How is it able to handle its debts and pensions? We have an answer. And Korea is very close to doing it. It wouldn't be that expensive to do. It is the comprehensive balance sheet. An accountable state and a confidence that this country has more of than America does, I think, in democracy, as being hand in hand with this. You do not have long-term good accounting, especially public accounting, without democracy. Even Singapore, for all of its supposed successes, and I think Singapore is highly overrated. It's a small country that depends on money laundering, okay? It does. It has all these successes. It has state companies still run by members of Lee Kuan Yew's family, but I do not consider it a model. I sit in every meeting, they're like, wish we could be like Singapore. I'm like, no, how about South Korea? I mean, that's what you want, but that's a lot harder to sell to people, okay? But I think if South Korea could make these reforms, it would see such benefits, and it could also be a beacon, and it could strengthen its democracy at a key time. It can do so many things. And this brings us back to this vision of this merchant. And I know this is a Eurocentric vision, but it's still a vision, I think, of ambition, confidence, and good accounting, and of having comprehensive balance sheets based on accrual. Thank you very much.
That was an hour that really felt just like 5 minutes. We will now begin the panel discussion with our moderator and panelists. Let us welcome up to the stage Professor Kim, who will moderate the session, and Professor Jacob Sol. Once again, could you please come up to the stage for the panel discussion? We will now hand over the mic to Professor Kim Bo-hwan from SNU, who will be moderating this session.
김보환 교수님,
Professor Kim, the floor is yours.
큰 박수로 김보환 교수님께
Please give a big hand to our moderator as I hand over the microphone.
네, 안녕하십니까. 저는 오늘 토론회
Good morning. I'm the moderator for this session. My name is Kim Bo-hwan, and I'm a professor at Seoul National University. That was an amazing presentation by Professor Jacob Sol. And the book, Public Net Worth, that has been published in Korea, was a great opportunity for me to read all about what I was interested in. I am in the profession of teaching, and I research a lot on this topic as well. And you will know very well, but starting in 2009, our central government has adopted accrual basis accounting, but a lot of people are very indifferent, and the government and the National Assembly, everyone is very indifferent. So to my students, I always emphasize the importance behind accrual accounting, and when we're accounting for 2,800 trillion Korean won in national finance, how can we do this without accrual accounting? But I think that this really feels like I'm just talking at the wall at times, because people seem very indifferent to it. So your lecture was really like an oasis, meeting and finding an oasis in the desert. So thank you for your insightful presentation. Thank you for your emphasis on how accounting can truly change the world, how Korea, the wider world, can benefit and transform based on accounting. So thank you, and that was an exciting time for me. My fingers are tingling because it was so exciting of a lecture. So thank you very much. I'll try to calm down now. And now we'll be looking into perspectives from Korean finance, economy, and much more, as our panelists are from various professions. So first, let me introduce you to our panelists. First off, we have Oh Seok-tae, economist at SG Securities. Please give a big hand.
그리고 정도진
Next, Professor Chung Do-jin from Chungang University.
예, 그리고 홍순만
Next up,
연세대학교
Professor Hong
교수님이십니다.
Sun-man from Yonsei University.
예, 그리고 장우현
And last but
한국조세재정연구원
not
실장님
least,
나오셨습니다.
General Manager Jang Woo-hyun from KIPF.
네, 저희가 토론을 한 40분 정도
We have about 40 minutes allotted to the panel discussion, and after that, we will be taking questions from the floor for about 10 to 15 minutes.
각각 지정 토론자께서 한 10분
We
내로
will give 10 minutes to each of our panelists for the introductory remarks. So let's go just by the order that we have here. First, with economist Mr. Oh.
저는 사실 회계가 아니라 경제학
I'm not an accountant, I'm an economist. So, from an economist point of view, let me give you my 2 cents. From an economist point of view, accounting is quite different from what you may think from an accountant's point of view. But I will try to
고등학교 때 사실
remain neutral. So, let me go back
부기를 배웠거든요.
to my high school years when I learned double entry accounting.
부기가 인류 최고의 발명품
And
중에 하나다.
double entry is said to be one of man's greatest inventions. But during high school years, it wasn't a mandatory class, but it was a selective course that I did take, and I was glad that I took it later on.
특히 뭐 재정 그런 입장에서
From
이
economy or finance point of view, we look at accounting, but at times it's complicated and you get confused because in accounting you have accrual basis.
경제학 쪽에서
But from an economist's point of view, if you look at fiscal policy, we look at it from a cash basis point of view. So if it's a budget deficit, then it's a liability, it's debt. It's a lot more simple from an economist's point of view. I've worked as an economist at financial institutions throughout my career, and I've at times been frustrated at this disparity of why we do this, of why we think this way. But as Jacob Saul mentioned in his presentation, the central government in Korea is using a balance sheet that is disclosed using accrual basis accounting, but it really isn't utilized that much. And to my knowledge, there are fiscal policies that are being pursued by the government, and on the surface level, it seems easy to understand because you just look at budget deficit, what number GDP, what number government debt number. That's very simple. And it's cash basis. It's simple accounting. I think that's the way we're headed, and so that's very unfortunate from my point of view. I want to point out a few things. In the past in Korea, if you look at these issues that have arisen, in hindsight, it seems that if we had used accrual basis, then some of these crises may have been milder in a sense. Last year, in the fiscal sense and financially, it was a very difficult year, but from the government side, the government used funds to cap the increase in debt. That's what is said from the government side. But if a double entry had been used, and if we had looked at the net assets decrease or increase, then I don't think that would be the same message. Well, anyways, if we used double entry for last year's government finances, then I think it would have given a much clearer picture into the reality. And this is already something that happened 20 years ago that I'm going to be talking about, but the government leverages fiscal policies to impact societal and economic issues. But back then, the theme was about using private funds. But I thought back then, what if the government issued government bonds to create its own public funds to deal with these issues and take on these initiatives? But why did they not do this? I mean, if you decrease or reduce the government debt, these, even if you reduce the government debt, then it's more like short-term expenses. It really doesn't bring down the entire government expenditure. So the BT project, which utilized private funds, is still underway.
공무원 연금 관련 부채를 상당히 비중 있게 취급을 하더라고요.
And we always talk about public official pension fund liabilities. I think it's been about 10 years during the Park administration. There were reforms that were initiated regarding public official pension funds. And it was partially successful. But a lot of public officials still are complaining about their pensions. And the reform isn't complete. I don't think the public has a good grasp of whether this pension reform was completed and was successful. But if the government had used accrual basis double entry systems and released the results of how the public finance changed after these pension reforms, then I think our public will have had a better understanding about the reforms and will have a better basis upon which to assess and evaluate these pension reforms. Back then, the pension reforms were just said to reduce the government debt by some amount, but it still seems that the government, in what it issues as its asset and liabilities in the statement of financial position, it seems that the pension liability is still taking up a very large share. And if we look at research, it seems to be the same in the UK as well, and a lot of other countries where government liability is in large part accounted for by public official pension. But if we had used double entry systems more at the forefront, then maybe the impact or positive effects of these pension reforms will have been easier to understand from the public's point of view. That's just one thing I wanted to point out. And Professor Jacobson also touched upon this as well, but when a financial crisis hits, a national crisis hits, public finance and accounting really does play a key role. That's when state accounting really shines. So let's think about Korea's crises. We have various challenges such as the depleting pension funds and low birth rates, aging society, so on and so forth. Professor Jacobson said that Korea is amazing, but from a Korean's point of view of Korea, Korea is not on a good trajectory. It really is flailing. So using double entry, especially regarding pension issues, and also healthcare insurance. These need to be improved. In reading in Professor Saul's book, it was interesting that when we look at collapsing public finances, we think of Japan. But in this book, it seems that Japan has been lauded more in terms of, if we look at the comprehensive balance sheet, they're doing quite well. And the UK and US, in terms of the comprehensive balance sheet, have a higher net debt. So I'm curious about what Korea's position would be in terms of that barometer. But I don't know about defense-wise, but at least in terms of pension and healthcare expenditure, if these two could be clarified in a comprehensive balance sheet, that would be great. Of course, with that balance sheet in and of itself, it's not going to automatically overnight address these issues and solve everything as a panacea. But if we have these comprehensive balance sheets in place, it's at least going to give us a clear picture of where we are now and where we need to be headed based on where we are now. Of course, looking at the demographic data is important, but just pouring at that data isn't everything, because we need to look at the financial impacts using such a double entry system and accrual basis accounting that gives you a clear picture on these balance sheets. That was my 2 cents. Thank you.
네, 오석태 이코노미스트님 감사드립니다.
Thank you for your remarks,
그
economist
두 가지
Soteo.
정도가 제가 좀
So
와닿는데요.
I believe that
첫 번째
we can
BTL
sum up
얘기하신 거 사실은
with the 2
이
points. You talked
comprehensive
about the
balance sheet 얘기를
BTL.
하셨는데
You talked
이게
about
정부의
comprehensive
범위를 어떻게
balance
정할
sheet.
것이냐.
So the range
사실
of the government
굉장히,
is also
중요한
an issue,
부분입니다.
very
지금
important
우리나라
issue.
국가재무제표는
Because the
중앙정부만
national
지정되는
balance
단체는
sheet has also
포함되지 않고
only the
있고요. 또
central,
당연히
not the
공공기관도
local
지금
government.
빠져
And
있습니다.
of course, the
여러 가지
publicly
BTL
run
도
companies are
포함이지만
also
여러 가지
excluded.
사업을
So
이제
BTL is
공공기관을 통해서
included,
정부가
but
많이 지원을
also
해주고
there are
있는
many
부분이기
services
때문에
from the
그런
publicly
부분들에
run
대한 또 앞으로
companies.
논의도 좀 있어야
So
될것
we
같고
need to discuss
연금하고
about that too.
건강보험에
Also,
대한
the pensions and the healthcare
시국이적인
also needs a
지원이
the
필요하다.
double entry accounting, he
잘
said.
아시겠지만 연금 같은
As you may
경우에는
well
우리나라
know,
국가재무제표에는
the pension is recorded as a only the military and the teacher's pension is not included in the pension in our accounting. So we have to think about that too.
정도진 교수님.
So next, Professor Jung Do-jin, please go ahead. Thank you. So I will keep it my remarks in 10 minutes. So the accrual basis debts and the liabilities are very important for the states. It is described in the many researches papers. Also, we have Mr. Park from the KIPF. When I worked there, there was the research. Also, you talked about the accountant journal, which Iambo contributed again. When the debt increased 1% compared to the GDP, and the confidence goes down 0.04. If the deficit increased 1%, the rating goes down to the 0.2. So at school, if the information, accrual basis information, has an impact in the financial market, and it was already proved. But also, the moderator said that the people are indifferent to this. We always talk about this. So as an alternative to this, we have to have change the national reporting system from the information to the mandatory. So we try to provide many alternative solutions to that. But if you look at the reality, the settlement report of the national finance are provided not on that year, but the next year in May. So now, let's say we don't have any information about the 2023. So I think that is not fully used yet. So we have I once wrote an article about the day for the national accounting. We have the national accounting committee, and also we have a deliberate committee under the MOIS, and also we have a non-profit organizations like run by the Professor Bae. So I think he is leading such kind of effort alone. So we also had the accountant committee under the government, but all these committee are the standard committee for the accrual basis, but those were all abolished. So we have to reflect on ourselves because we didn't make any voice for the national accounting. So look at the Jacob Sol's book. There was the budget and the market response became the opportunity to get down the prime minister in his book. So during his presentation, making a strong voice for the politics is highly required, he said. However, but the accrual basis in our national accounting shows that our democracy is going backward because all those committees were abolished. Then why that happened? We don't need to talk about the philosophical concept of the democracy. However, we have to see how democracy works. Of course, there is accounting law in North Korea. North Korea say itself as a democratic country. Our president emphasized the transparency of the union labor, but the metal union labor union voted against about the accounting. So the most biggest advantage of the accrual basis is to have the picture of the future and also the current status. But the politicians and administrative people are hesitating and do not agree to show the future information to the public. That's why they don't want to report the accrual basis accounting. The one good example is that now the presidents are traveling around to make a pledge for the next election, but the 1,000 trillion won is needed for that. This is money for the future, but I don't think it is feasible. I believe that we have the correspondence here, so I should be careful. But when the province wanted to build their office there, however, the government did not give any money for that, and that province wanted to build their office with their own money. That means that they try to use the other money allocated for other purpose. So at current situation, I'm doubtful whether the accrual basis can work or not. So this, in order to avoid this proxy cost, we have a monitoring process in the current accounting scenery. So Mr. Park and I think also the KIA, KIPF, and KAA made this kind of the joint seminar. So in order for the accrual basis to take a root, monitoring should be the first one to set up. So the monitoring is done by the audit agency, government audit agency, but all the financial reports are given to the third party to make. And the National Assembly goes to the Sejong City, and then they are not ready for this financial reporting. So at the end of the May, the National Assembly should report all the accounting and the financial statement, but that is not fully working well. As the Professor Jacob Sol said, he touted about the Korean situation. We have the huge size and we have wonderful professionals here, but we have to set up an independent accounting agency, I believe. Under this agency, we have to deal with all the public and private and the non-profit accounting so that we can have the independent, the largest scale accounting agency for the monitoring. I believe that this cannot be done only with this single event of the seminar. So our three agencies should make this kind of seminar in a sustainable way so that we can move forward to the future. So let's make some like a discussion forum or the platform so that we can invite Professor Jacob to that platform. Okay, let me talk about the net worth briefly. As of the 2022, our net worth is 500 trillion. But the problem is the most of our net worth is about the road or the land. The net worth in the private and the net worth in the public are different, but unfortunately, I was a member of the KIPF-KAI-KAA, and the most frustrating thing is that the KIPF-KAI-KAA is following the IFSR. I'm not sure whether that is right or not. But because we don't hear any like a public voice from these kind of associations, association. So if we have a joint seminar and a joint platform, like a Professor Jacob Sol can give idea about like public accounting's role, which can lead the accounting, I believe. Thank you very much.
네, 정도윤 교수님 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Professor Jung.
우리나라 국가 회계 정보의 좀
He
적시성에
touched
대해서
upon the timeliness of our public finance information, and that really resonates. We get that information too late, so then it ends up being quite meaningless in a sense.
그런 것들을 볼 수 있을 것
I
같고요.
think that was a point
회계청
pointed out.
제시했습니다.
And also, he recommended that we establish an accounting agency at the national level. It could act as an arm of the government that prevents these crises. And he also touched upon the standards that are different in public state accounting and also private company accounting. For those of you, if you have any questions or comments, please fire away because we have the Q&A sheets that we have prepared for you, so jot them down. And after the panel discussion, we will gather those Q&A sheets and address your questions, so please jot them down. Next, Professor Hong, please go ahead. As introduced, my name is Sunman Hong. I will keep right on time to my 10 minutes allotted time. 10 years ago, I had the chance to read Professor Sol's The Reckoning, and I'm a huge fan, and it's such an honor to be here as a panelist on the same panel as Professor Sol. I'm teaching in administration, and I also did work at an accounting firm, so I can give you a sort of integrated view, I believe, from both the academic side and the accounting side. The budget management goes really, accounting goes hand in hand with democracy. I think it was 15 years ago. Government funds went into these initiatives, and the publicly owned companies took charge of these initiatives, and public finances really grew at that time. And there were a lot of red flags that were raised throughout the years. Right now, the risks and red flags that we see in these initiatives and projects haven't been incorporated in public balance sheets. I think this is why Professor Sol has emphasized the importance of developing better accounting standards, because these issues will be alleviated. But I think I can talk to you in 3 parts about what we can consider in the future. So first of all, I agree completely that accounting is important. But just because we improve accounting standards, better asset management isn't just going to come along. I think it's been about 10 years or so where the government started to manage public organization, public institution debt, and in order to match or to reach the debt targets, they began to sell off high quality blue chip assets at a very low price. And these publicly owned companies have complied with accounting standards to the T, but these issues have still arisen. So accounting, of course, is a very important precondition, but it is not a sufficient condition. So second, just by reforming public accounting standards isn't going to really encompass everything in terms of socioeconomic issues, because there are some unique aspects to government accounting. When the government invests, that is an asset, so it does lead to increase in net worth, but government expenditure isn't capitalized. So how do we do that in the balance sheet? These are some issues that we need to also think about as well. But what if the government spends on research and development? This isn't going to increase in net worth either. But the nation's science capabilities and competencies somewhere in the society, in the form of research capabilities of our youth, is going to appear and in the end bring and generate economic value in the future. But this also is not going to be incorporated fully and reflected in government balance sheets alone. So just because we overhaul government accounting standards is not going to resolve all of the issues that we have at hand. Third, state accounting has its own unique challenges. The comprehensive balance sheet concept that is introduced in Professor Stahl's book, The Public Net Worth, although that wasn't dealt with too much in detail in today's presentation, requires a lot of assumptions about the future. Of course, accrual basis is about the future, but in private company accrual basis, the market creates prices, sets prices based on future expectations. And so that market price based on future expectations plays a very important role. But in government accounting, state accounting, these assets don't have a market price that is set by market movements. So these need to be just really assumed in a sense. So to give you an example, I think it was also alluded in the book as well. If we look at the comprehensive balance sheets of the G7 countries that is shown in this book, Japan's finances are really quite top-notch. But if you look at these balance sheets, the discount is there. You adjust for the discount because of the difference in interest rate, for example. And if you look at the per capita, for example, and incorporate all of that as well, at times Japan's finances can look very bad. So what assumptions should we use? What conditions should we base our opinions on? That's it for me. Thank you.
네, 홍수만 교수님 감사합니다.
Thank you, Professor Hong.
전반적으로는 지금 소울 교수님의 어떤
So
주장에
overall,
동의하시지만
he agreed to
생각해봐야
the
될
Jacob
문제를
Saul's idea, but there are still we have to think about. And changing the accounting does not automatically goes to lead to the management. And then there are something we need to solve. And also there is some special characters of the public network, so we have to consider how to record them, and also the public asset without the price, how it can be reflected into the balance sheet. So, and the least, we will invite Mr. Chang from the KIPF. Hello, everyone. I am Chang Woo-hyun from KIPF. Last November, I got a call from the Mr. Lee, and I was invited to this seminar, but all the work was done by the park, and I just became the panelist of today's event. So this joint seminar is not easy to arrange, but thank you for your cooperation. I'm a fast talker, so I will go a little slow for the interpretation. Thank you first, and I'm so honored to become a panelist here today. Let me introduce about the KIPF first. Because people are not interested in the project run by the government institutions, we had the comprehensive the forecast about the healthcare and the pension and all the tax issues, and those are the object of our study. So please come to our homepage and check our report, especially the Professor Hong. Maybe do not know about it, but the Mr. Park talked about how we can reflect the R&D into the balance sheet. So all those researches are still going on. So please refer to our homepage for the reports. So I'm the economist, and I am in the government policy now. So it's very meaningful to join this event because when I was in the college, I joined all the accounting classes because he said that in order to go study abroad, you have to go to the math class. So without knowing the quality of the flour, you cannot become the great pastry chef, he said. So I believe that I met a great professor, and I'm using all the accounting knowledge I learned from the college right now. So I hope that we can have more and more this kind of events so that we can understand, economists can understand accounting. And also, of course, the accountant should understand the economics. So I hope that this kind of event should be held more often. And also, I'm the working labor person. I'm in charge of all the midterm and short-term and long-term expenditures. And also, I'm keep having the text from the government agencies. So I don't have that often opportunity to come here to see people and to have a discussion, because working is a little not related to the actual situation, frankly speaking. So I will be here until the lunch. So if you have any questions or concern, please come to me, and I will provide explanation if you have any questions. Then let me talk about today's presentation now. Today's presentation was so useful, and it was such a great summary for all the working people, I believe. And also, most of all, it fulfilled my curiosity for the study, intellectual curiosity. So I felt like refreshed, and I felt like I become the college student again. So thank you very much, Professor Saul. So he talked about the tools for the net worth. And I'm totally agree to his idea, and I think that is the great tools. And I believe that the public officials and the government understand that, but they do not have the systemic approach. So I'm not presenting you the idea of our agency. I'm just saying my personal opinions. So many people are concerned about the flu. And if you look about the next year budget, it's about 18.1 trillion, and it hit the record high budget, and the expenditures is around 4.8%. So it is a very solid, the healthy finance. However, I believe that the governments understand that there is a tool to use, because we have the public net worth and assets, and through that kind of asset we can make the revenues. So there is some delay, as in 80s the US did. Maybe we can empower the private sector so that we can utilize all the assets. I believe that that can be the great tools we have, but we need to have a more efficient and transparent reporting. And also already the public officials and the governments are knowing about that. So I'd like to make it stipulated in the law to use it, fully utilize it. So, and also we have to enhance awareness for the systemic understanding about this. And whenever we talked about the net worth, many people has a lot of concern, because it can be used well, but it can be also used negatively. But the asset evaluation is very difficult thing. So the price multiplied the total quantity is not the total net worth. It's not true. So can we buy all the water by buying all the diamond, selling the diamond? So there is the problem of the demand and the supply. So if there could be a bubble, all the asset can fall apart. So the industry can be the great asset, but the SOC or the SOC or the real estate can be the risky asset. So we need to have any compliments about it. So I'd like to ask a question and a comment about it. And also this is a suggestion from my side and also my concern. So you talked about the mandatory expenditure. So these mandatory expenditures increase a lot, so we don't have any room for usage. And the public do not understand very well about it. If we provide the money to the public, the 60 trillion per year, but we cannot give it every year because it is a huge debt. And so this mandatory expenditure is submitted by the lawmaker, but we have to ask them to provide the report together. And because publics are concerned about the increased mandatory expenditures. So in summary, that is a great tool, but there is the concern about the misusage. Every tool has those kind of characteristics, but we have to use well, and we have to avoid all the misusage. And Jacob Saul, Professor, you have a lot of knowledge from the historical point of view, so please share your idea with us. I believe that we still have a hope. Korea is a #1 populous country, but the fertility is going down continuously now. So we need to manage our population, and we have to worry about the infertility too, low fertility rate. So I'd like to ask a question too. Because I emphasize always that we have to change the reporting system per capita because per capita, we don't have any problem, but due to the decreased number of population, it seems like a problem. So that's why I think Japan is doing good. Because I'm saying that, you don't believe it, but the Nobel Prize winner also said about it. So if we change the reporting system into the per capita unit, I believe that it would be changed too. So our agency is working hard a lot. So please, I'd like to ask you the interest and the affection about it.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chang talked about how net worth is a very important tool, but how it can be misleading in a sense. And so what are the frameworks that we can use to make sure that it remains useful, and also highlighted the importance of per capita figures?
시간을 잘 지켜주셔서 모든 토론자분들께
Well, thank you for keeping to your time. I think everyone was very much on time, and we have 3 questions from the floor. And I will be addressing these questions later on and asking Professor Saul these questions. I don't think we will be able to go through all of these questions, but I will read out all of them, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to address.
제가 뭐 성명을 누가 했는지 해도 괜찮아요.
Can I read out the name as well, or are they anonymous? Okay, Professor Do
질문을 해주셨는데
asked this question.
제가 이제 그 서울 교수님한테는 이걸 보여드렸고요.
I already showed this to Professor Saul. The question goes as follows. The role of politicians are extremely important, and accountability
대해서 어떤 그 의식을 가지고 있는
and the commitment and the awareness about accountability from the politicians' side is important, because at times the politicians are seen as not being accountable because they're not incentivized to be accountable. Can you tell us about an example of a country or a failure of an example of a failed accountability from politicians? And second, I think this reads Tae-yoon Kim. It's a question from an accountant. There are 2 questions. Question number 1. The title of your book is different in Korean and English. It's quite different. In English, it's Public Net Worth. But the Korean title is How Accounting Can Save Democracy. What is your view on the difference in the title? Do you think that the Korean title truly captures the message that you wanted to send? Question number 2, I will go over later due to time constraints. Professor Kim from Aju University asked the following question.
채무를 하면서 D1, D2, D3
D1, D2, D3
계산을 하고 있죠.
are calculated for government debt. D1
폐기를 하고 그래서 국가 부채로 변경을 할 필요가 있고
should be disposed of and
각각 공표하는 걸 법적으로 의무화할 필요가 있다.
written down as government debt, and D2 and
그다음에
D3
그 아까
criteria should be used.
정부
I think that was a
정보가
comment.
잠재표가 너무
And we talked
적시적이다
about how
보니까
the
이런
government fiscal data, financial information comes out too late and it's not timely. In May, the settlement that is supposed to come out, could it be brought forward to February, for example? Can you tell us about any cases in other countries where, well, for example, New Zealand, I think it's settled on a monthly basis, it's balanced and reported on a monthly basis. So can you tell us about any other examples of more timely government financial data being disclosed? And last but not least, President Kwon states the following: non-financial information and financial information integrated in a report is extremely important. That needs to happen. Non-financial information and financial information need to appear in one statement. Can you tell us about any examples from maybe the US or even any other countries where non-financial and financial information appear on financial statements?
Two good questions
in
and
one.
too many questions. So you can pick and yeah, okay.
This is great. I mean, this was really amazing and it's interesting to see everyone in agreement, but also a lot of skepticism, and the skepticism is really important. This is historically really hard to do. And by the way, as we've been here and as we discussed, I think I can actually put some of the questions into one question. How can we actually achieve this? And I think that's what so many people were getting at, the frustration, right? That you have. It's so obvious what we need to do, and it's so hard how to do it. And again, I've worked with quite a lot of funding to try and figure out how to get the public interested in these things, how to get politicians interested. We found that we can get politicians interested in it by the press. And I don't know South Korea well enough. I do know that it has an incredibly active press. There's a lot of press because it has probably the only truly actively free press in East Asia that I've seen, right? I would leverage that. We already have at this table a well-known economist who remarkably discusses accounting in a fluent way. It would be incredible to see op-eds. You know, I am the economist who thinks that accounting is one of the answers. That's one way of selling this. I mean, Koreans like economists, they respect them, right? And I talked about this the other day. I do think industry has to play a role in helping to basically, I mean, I don't know what better word, publicity. To do publicity, we could call it propaganda. That's the wrong word because we're trying to get the truth out there, right? So to do constant publicity, I studied something the other day that in America, we think that opinion pieces in papers actually sway public opinion. There are very few things that can sway public opinion, but well-leveraged, we call them hooked opinion pieces that are connected to current events, and you swing the opinion piece around sort of to serve your purpose. So an event happens and you write something and you show how that event is related to the question or the point you're trying to make. I think a strong campaign of opinion pieces about this is a place to start to get a national discussion going. Is it possible? Yeah, it is possible. I wrote 3 opinion pieces in the New York Times about accounting, and then another 6 or 7 during the Greek debt. And this got a lot of public interest in the United States, in the financial markets, and in the European community, just by leveraging the New York Times. That's not so easy to do, okay? But that's how you have to think. I mean, you have to think big. The other thing that I think is really helpful, and because I've been involved with these campaigns that I myself have kind of done, is what you want to do is you want to get a whole bunch of opinion pieces in the Korean press. Then you want the Financial Times to kind of come in and make some statement, and then people say, wow, the Financial Times cares. Then suddenly you have bankers and politicians saying, you know, you're onto something. So this is the way we've done it before. I'm just talking about, I mean, I've been involved with politics. This is how we get political points across the line and move things. Remember this. I mean, I've been involved with politics. It takes repetition, repetition, repetition. And for the Greek debt crisis, we had a billionaire behind us who was interested and following the rules. He never broke a law. I was impressed by that. But it took 3 years to do that, and it cost millions of dollars. And we actually had a coalition of people from all political parties who, not all of them, not the far right. We actually got the far left. That was amazing. Who then did the reforms. We couldn't even believe that that's how it happened. So I do think that having a literal political campaign strategy is the way to do this. And you might fail, but it's the only way forward that I've been involved with that works. And that includes advertising. That includes bringing numerous experts in to give public talks in forums, write op-eds, make sure that then it becomes a national question so it gets covered by the foreign press, so it bounces back. So I'm just telling you how to run an international political campaign. It might sound impossible, but we've done it. By the way, and this is a kind of capitalist vision, are there economic interests that would benefit from this happening here? And that's a cynical view, but it's also a legitimate view. The Greek debt reforms that we made, I don't think would have been possible with the fact that Paul Kazarian, at the time, a billionaire, truly actually believed in it. I mean, he made a lot of money from it, but he also believed in it. I mean, kind of like a crazy bull banging his head against the wall. He turned out to be right. And we were all in it together. And he assembled a bunch of experts and people to come talk. And you need people who can make the case publicly, who can speak well to a wide audience who are extremely appealing. And so I do think that the title of the book, if it works in Korean, I don't know, but I think that this is a real, I mean, in America, we have a huge crisis of confidence. 40-something% of Americans don't even believe in global warming. It's a disaster. I don't know how we go further with that, right? I mean, how can they not? They don't even believe in scientific evidence. So I believe America is starting with a bigger handicap than Korea is. But I do think we have to make this case that, as we said, Korea is flailing. Everybody's flailing right now, except for havens where people launder money, right? Everybody's flailing. So who's flailing worse? That's my question. So South Korea might look like it's flailing on the inside, and it is, right? I don't want to get political here, but there's some big problems and big challenges on top of an incredible success. So I do think this is a question. Putting it in such dramatic terms, I think, is useful. I don't know how effective that works in political discourse here, but I do think these terms are dramatic, and we have to take the kind of almost medical terms, the technical dullness away from accounting and bring some passion into it. Where has this worked? I mean, interestingly, we've seen these reforms and we've seen these things work in parts of the British Empire former British Empire, sorry, because now they're richer in many ways, places like Australia and New Zealand per capita than Britain. We've seen it work there. Why? New Zealand, and so in America, we have accounting dominated by the big, is it 4 or is it 3 now? I always forget, right? It was 8, a few years ago. Is it, I never know, right? If it's 3 or 4 or 2, you never know. But Australia had a much better financial crisis than everyone else, or a less severe one. One of the reasons we think is that it had not allowed many of the financial tricks and bad accounting. And one of the reasons is that it had more than 100 competing accounting firms. So this is one of these moments when market competition, I do think, actually is really helpful, and not having monopolies in accounting. And we see it in Europe, oh my God, with the big whatever they are. They have all the EU contracts, so they will never contradict or say anything political because they get these massive contracts that they live on, which I understand. At the same time, they can't do their democratic job because they're looking after these huge contracts given by the European community. This is something that we struggled with, and we know we can't look to the firms in Europe. And by the way, this is a true story. In America, I've written, a very influential book on accounting. Only once was I invited by a Big Four firm to give a talk, and it was canceled by the firm. And the partner who invited me couldn't understand it. I said, well, I understand. If you can't understand, you might want to think more about the industry that you're in. They didn't want me coming in and talking about these issues because it was bad for the bottom line. And eventually, you have to think when your bottom line eats your industry and destroys it, because that's what I think the big and ever getting bigger and smaller at the same time industry is happening. Timely financial data happens, we see in these countries that have closer approximations of comprehensive balance sheets and higher standards. And New Zealand should be the model for everyone in that, because they did it. And how they did it, when Ian Ball tells the story, it was a political accident. It was a labor government that didn't really understand the ramifications of it, that asked for it, and then it happened kind of in between elections, as I understand it. So the only place that gets it by accident. And I do think that is a very Machiavellian way of understanding how you get these reforms through. This is real politics. You need people with great political dexterity to do this. And I work with people in politics who do have dexterity. They just don't happen to be interested in this problem, right? And so that's a question. And then there's this non-financial and financial data, which is a huge challenge. And we discussed it yesterday. I'm really for now competing or parallel balance sheets, where you have the traditional financial balance sheet with another balance sheet that is put out there that might be more narrative, that might be definitely more experimental, more literary. But I said this yesterday, and I'll say it again, will be of much more interest to the public than the financial data sheet. And that non-financial data sheet might be a way of leveraging information and passion and interest to get people actually interested in the financial data sheet. And one of the things we've seen in the United States is, basically ESG has been really has been getting people much more interested in these questions, and everyone involved with accounting suddenly interested in this. And there are conferences and there are articles about it. And by the way, I was able to publish, they gave the thing a crazy title that had nothing to do with it, but I was able to publish in Politico an article on the history of ESG, and I've been giving lots of speeches about it. And I'm going to actually write a book on basically financial ethics. It's a history of virtue now, because there's such interest in virtue and ethics. There's not interest in the financial data, but there are ways of making that happen. You have to be creative. So, I think what would be really interesting, I mean, again, if I were sitting there and I had my billionaire friend next to me and we had some money, and he was tight with the money, that's why he's a billionaire, so he didn't like to spend except when he thought it was going to work. And I would say, look, by the way, he never wanted to hire PR firms. He brought in people with track records of communication already, but I still thought we should have brought in PR firms. Maybe a PR firm, but people with track records of communication, writing big op-eds in newspapers, start a campaign and make a strategy. Literally make a strategy and see if it works. To start it out doesn't cost much, and you can get a feel of how it's working. And that's what we did in Greece and the European community, and we had a lot of success, and it actually transferred over into the United States. And I was at the forefront of that, and I was amazed at how well it worked. It is very, very hard to get these op-eds in the major papers, but it would be amazing to see a flurry of op-eds or opinion pieces in Korea about this by getting people from all different branches to write about it. But most interesting, having leading economists come out and say, I'm a leading economist, and guess what? You don't actually understand how economics works. Here's how. And if this is something you need to know. People love how to get rich, how to stay rich. So you use this, I don't know if it's stupid, but this hook to do this. This is all about political communication. I have to say, accounting has not been great at that, and it has to get better. And I think that's actually what we talked about. Everyone's questions were interrelated into this question. Although there are good communicators in the room, I already see how it could work. And frankly, I'd be interested to hear from you how you think it could work, if you even think that's a viable approach in South Korea.
예, 감사합니다. 예, 박수 좀 부탁드리겠습니다. 예, 예. 아, 뭐 여러 가지 얘기해 주셨는데
Thank you for that.
반성하게 되네요. 이
Those wide
전문가들이
array of remarks.
아까 그 정도인
Our
교수님께서 이런
experts here talked about
전문가들이 침묵했다.
how when these associations and these boards were all canceled, then we remained silent. But we need to leverage the press. We need to leverage the impact of these op-eds, PR, good PR.
누군가 언젠가는 알아주겠지 이렇게.
We can't just sit on our laurels and think that just because accounting is great, someone is going to notice sometime in the future. It really requires your active support, your endeavor. I think everyone needs to have a hand in this. That was a very meaningful session. Last, I want to close by talking about something that really hit home that Professor Saul said. Failure.
나라가 망하면
If a state goes belly up, that's when you get to see the balance sheets. I think it's the same for New Zealand. I heard from Professor Ian Bull that it happened because of the debt crisis. Because that debt crisis happened during the Asian financial crisis in Korea, if back in 1997, President Kim Dae-jung and his officials and cabinet said that we needed a double entry. And back then, when people said we needed double entry, people were actually surprised that, oh, we're not doing double entry? We don't have accrual basis? That was when the government balance sheets were first introduced. So the same goes for Korea. We experienced crises, and that's when we took that opportunity to make that change. And that's always unfortunate. But before we shouldn't wait for these crises to happen. We need to be proactive and improve our balance sheets. So thank you to Professor Saul. Thank you for your amazing lecture. Thank you to our panelists. Once again, a big hand, everyone.
감사합니다. 이것으로 토론을 마치도록
Ladies and gentlemen, this brings our panel discussion to a close. Let's give a big hand to our moderator, Professor Kim, our panelists, and of course, Professor Jacob Saul. This brings our seminar to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here today at the seminar, and have a good day.